So put yourself in these disciples' shoes for just a second. You are following this Messiah, right? You're following this guy, and you're seeing more and more amazing things that he does. And you come to love him more and more, and you see how much he loves other people. And then he tells you that he's going to die because he's going to be betrayed. And then he will rise again. Now, maybe partly because he spoke in so many parables, you think this has to be another parable. He can't really mean this. This one, there's a double meaning in that. But when you're walking, you get to have this opportunity to talk to other disciples. So what do you talk about? Well, you think that they talk about what was Jesus talking about, right? You think that'd be the question. Or what did he mean by betray us? Like, certainly we're not going to betray him. He must mean someone else. What's this whole thing with the rising for the... None of those things. What do they talk about? Who was better among them? Now, I might be doing a little bit too much poetic license to say that they were maybe thinking who was going to replace Jesus if he did die, right? Who's the greatest? Who's the successor to Jesus? But that's what they talk about. And it brings me to this question, what is wrong with men? Why do we always have to compete about everything? Not that women don't compete sometimes too, but I feel like there's something about us guys that we just, like, if we're next to another car at a stoplight and we just happen to, see the green light at the same time and happen to notice that we're driving at about the same pace as the other car, we push our foot just a little bit farther on the accelerator because we don't mind if we're going a little over the speed limit, faster than we normally drive, but we just want to make sure that we're just a little ahead of the car next to us. We don't have to be way ahead necessarily, but we want to make sure if they pass us, then we are like, oh, right? We want to be, because we want to be first. It's this idea that we want to be first. And there's nothing that expresses this better than the battle between brothers. Brothers battle over who's best. And if brothers battle a lot, twin brothers battle even more about who's the greatest. We have two twins at this church, or, one twin. Well, how does that work? It's a set of twins. Okay, we have a set of twins, like a pair of shoes, okay? And the two of them battle all the time. And everything is a competition, like who can be better at that, who can be better. So one time I gave them a challenge. I said, name something, who's better at naming things that your brother is better at than you? That's some psychological stuff there, right? Who can tell me what their brother is better at first? Go! And it was a very long conversation. It started with, well, my brother's better at being stupid. They might be competitive, but they are brilliant. And they went on with, they came up with more and more things that were really negative. It was just ways to insult your brother backhandedly. They came up with a new game. Thanks, youth minister, right? So, but eventually one of them did, and I crowned him the winner of the game, because he eventually came up with something that is his brother. I think it was Zach that ended up coming up with them, if you know the twins, but I'm no better, because my brothers and I, we fought so much. We fought about everything. Of course, it helped that I had 6 years of separation between me and my oldest brother, so when we were really young, I couldn't really compete. So I think I was less competitive because I just saw I was going to lose if I made it a competition. Let's see how we can make this a team cooperative game, right? That was my brilliant thought there. But you first had John Peter. John Peter came out running, and I mean literally. When he was born, it just boom, he's out and he's running, okay? And John Peter was this fast, athletic guy back in the day, when he was fast and athletic. He was just blazingly quick. And it's funny because you see the races that my dad, who was a gym teacher, had us do a lot of physical activities. Pretty much his idea of creating a game to play with the kids is drills. He just drilled us all. It's like, all right, we're going to come up with this great game where you run to this end, and then you run back, and then you do this thing where you lay on the ground in a platform, and you touch the ground, and then you try to get yourself as far away from the ground, and you do that 10 times. And then you go on your back, and you try to reach up to the ceiling with keeping your butt on the ground, and you try to go as high as you can. You do that 10 times. Then you get up and you do it again. This is going to be a fun game that I just made up. So we play this game, and you see in our home videos, right, there's John Peter. And then, like, he comes back, and still making his way from the beginning is Robert. Boom. 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 Robert was slow. So Robert could not keep up with John Peter. So Robert was, in his mind, unathletic. Right? Because his brother was super fast. We're not even talking about Doy, because he just came up with his own game plan. He saw he wasn't going to win either. But Robert was like, oh, I'm not athletic. And for a long time, Robert just thought, John Peter's athletic and talented, and I'm not. Till one day, he figured out something. This moment where he had this epiphany, it was on the soccer field. And he was on the soccer field, and there was a guy coming from the opposing team, and here there was a soccer ball, and he was the defense, and he was trying to kick away the soccer ball, because in my family, even if you weren't athletic, you were going to be in sports. My dad's a gym teacher. That's just a given. So anyway, he's on the soccer field, and he goes to kick the ball, and the other guy goes to kick the ball, and they collide, right? They both just end up kicking each other's shin really hard. Just any of you have ever been banged in the shin, right? So they were both in excruciating pain. Now, the other guy was on the ground holding his shin in excruciating pain, whereas Robert was just kind of standing there and saw the ball. It was right next to him. And at that moment, he realized that he could win at sports. Because as much as he felt pain, he didn't really care. And the other people seemed to care a lot. And later we'd figure out by playing a lot of action video games and different things, there's RPG video games where people are different characters, okay? And there'll be different races that have strengths and weaknesses. And so there's this fast, agile guy who has strengths, right, and weaknesses. And then there's a character called the tank. This is the character that Robert eventually figured out he was. He couldn't be fast and agile, but he was a tank. He could go somewhere. It was going to take him a long time to get there, but when he got there, you couldn't take him anywhere else. No matter how much force was applied, he was staying there. He was the tank. And he ended up, that's why he was incredible at football, and wrestling was a good sport for him too, because, he could just bang into people and he was fine, right? And this is one of the things, okay, so it's not obviously a message about how to be good at sports. But I think there's a thing about having the perspective of knowing what you're good at and knowing what you're bad at that is incredibly helpful in life. And it's one of the areas that my brother Robert exceeds at. It's one of his strengths, is this guy has great confidence in what he's good at and complete awareness of what he's bad at. And when you talk to him about the things that he's bad, he doesn't try to say, wait a second, I'm not that bad at that thing. He just kind of goes, yeah, I'm not very good at that. And it's this great place to be that I think is, I really, in some ways, I hope that I'm more like Robert one day, because I'd like to be more confident in what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. Robert knows his role. He knows the role that he plays, and it's that great confident humility that he's got in that. That's one of the things we've been talking about in the last few weeks, is how to have that confident humility, that biblical humility of knowing who you are and knowing your role to play. Because the reality is what life is really about isn't a competition of winning. It's about being part of a community that's moving forward together. That's what life is really about. Because here's the good news of what we heard in the message today. The good news is that we can be the greatest. The bad news is the route to become the greatest. Okay? So I made up a trophy. I made it up for actually another sermon earlier that I gave. But here's the trophy. If you can see that, it says, humility #1. This is our trophy that we can... Now, who thinks they deserve the trophy? Okay, you're eliminated. But it's a trophy about knowing who you are and knowing your part to play, and it's a different model than others. Now, I want to mention that my dad did see that there was a problem with how competitive his sons were. So he came up with a strategy. His strategy is he'd play the games with us, and he would make sure that he was the timekeeper. And it took us a long time to figure out what he was doing. But for some reason, he'd be on my team, and we'd be winning. We'd be up by a bunch of points, and then all of a sudden, he'd start playing really bad. He'd toss the ball away and everything. He's stumbling. Up until they all of a sudden, and there was like 2 minutes left to play, but it felt like 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden, they tied up with us, and bang, the buzzer rang. And that was it. The game was over, and we kept tying. I didn't understand how it worked for the longest time till he was on my team, and then we were way behind, and he started playing really good, and then, wouldn't you know it, we tied again. It was very confusing for me trying to understand and figure out how I was supposed to live this life when I then was on a wrestling team, and I tied my brother Doy in a wrestling match with a real timer, not a dad-kept timer. And the wrestling coach is like, no, you can't stop now, you tied. And I'm like, but that's the whole point of sports. You're supposed to try to tie. That's the goal. And he's like, no, tying's like kissing your sister. Which was very confusing for me because I didn't have any sisters. I was kind of like, okay, it's kiss my sister. I don't know. And then he's like, kissing your brother. And then that round 2 started right there because I wasn't going to kiss Toy. So we went at it and everything. I did lose that one. But here's the secret. Here's the secret to being the greatest in life. According to the person that understood life best, Jesus Christ. It's being a servant of all. Now, the word servant is diaconate, or diakonos, which sounds a lot like doumenos, which we might know from dynamite, right? It sounds a lot like it's power and strength, and it is. But diakonos talks about being a servant. It's a different kind of strength. It's a different kind of confidence and quiet humility where you're able to put yourself in the role of a servant, to put yourself under someone and lift them up. And I can tell you there's nothing better we can do in this life than put ourselves under someone and lift them up. It's the greatest gift that we can ever give someone. To have that welcoming spirit that makes people feel comfortable. And I can say one of the gifts that I admire most is the gift of hospitality. And I admire it so much because I am very, very bad at it. Okay? It's just something... I am not naturally someone that's actually been good at expressing and communicating to people how I care about them and how I love them. In my life, that's been a learned skill. Because when I was younger, I really cared about people, but I could never seem to communicate that. And I've really worked at trying to get better at communicating to people how much I really care about them and how much I really love them. And I hope you guys all know that. If I don't communicate it sometimes to you, I'm sorry, but I work at that because I think it's so important, and I really do. Care about you guys, I love you guys, and I want to be there for you. Because that's what this is all about. That's what this... living this Christian life, being the greatest, is all about, is loving people. But if you come over to my house, Kate and I are not going to be on hand and foot serving you and giving you drinks and all these things like that because our brains we're not good at that. So I really admire that gift because it's just really important gift. But there's a lot of different ways to express serving others. And one of those is just doing things, right? Like, to point someone out specifically, Brian is often just like setting up tables. Larry, who actually isn't here right now, but he was here a second ago, is often like setting up tables and setting up chairs, and that service is great. And I try not to talk bad about other pastors or the things that they say, but there's a school of thought in some ministries that like the best way to be equipped for leadership is like doing those service things first. And I don't like that for a couple reasons, one of which is it expresses the wrong perspective on what's greatness. Because service is not a stepping stone to greatness. Serving is greatness. You don't get to like set up chairs and tables and then eventually you move past that and you get to be something great, a leader who speaks on a pulpit and all this fancy stuff. No, that's not greatness. Serving is greatness. That is greatness. The quiet, loving, caring, just doing things for other people, that's greatness. We have different gifts that we give in the body. But the ones that are the guys that are up here, this is not the moment of my greatness, okay? If I ever have a moment of greatness, it is not from up here on the pulpit. The moment of greatness is the things that you guys never hear about that I'm hopefully doing in quiet without telling anyone, to love other people, to take care of other people. That's greatness. C.S. Lewis knew about this when he shared this in The Great Divorce. He talked about, C.S. Lewis was one of the best theologians at expressing what heaven is really like. Because he didn't describe heaven as like the clouds and the mists and like you could step right through the cloud and then you'd fall back to earth and you're like, oh, how do I get up there again? Right? Which is a really silly perspective, very elementary perspective of heaven. He talks about something very solid, something very real. And he shares this. First came bright spirits, not the spirits of men, but they danced and scattered flowers. Then on the left and the right, at each side of the forest avenue, came youthful shapes, boys upon one hand, girls upon the other. If I could remember their singing and write down the notes, no man who read them would ever be sick or old again. That's how beautiful the music was. All these young men on one side and young women on dancing and singing. Between them went musicians. And after this, a lady whose honor all of this was being done. Okay, so everything, this great parade, procession, was all being done in the honor of this one woman. He said, I remember the unbearable beauty of her face. Her face was so beautiful, I couldn't bear to look at it. He said, Is it, I whispered to my guide, not at all, said he. It's someone you'll never have heard of. Her name on earth was Sarah Smith. You know her. And she lived at Golders Green. She seems to be, a person of particular importance. She is. She's one of the great ones. Yet you have never heard, because the fame in this country is very different from the fame on earth. He said, who are these gigantic people? They look like emeralds who are dancing and throwing flowers before her. Haven't you heard, like in Milton, these are the angels that follow her and proceed from where she's going. And who are all these young men and women on each side? They're her sons and her daughters. She must have had a very large family. Every man or boy who met this woman became her son. Even if the boy was just someone who brought meat to her back door, and every girl that she met became her daughter. Isn't that a bit hard on her own parents? No. See, there are people that steal other people's children, but her motherhood was of a different kind. Those on whom it fell went back to their natural parents, loving them more. Few men looked on her without becoming, in a certain fashion, her lovers. But it was the kind of love that made them not less true, but truer to their own wives. And she had all these animals with her, and he was saying, what are all these animals? And she said, see, every beast and bird that came near her had a place in her love. In her they became themselves. And the abundance of life she has in Christ from the Father flows into them. I looked at my teacher in amazement. Yes, he said, it is like when you throw a stone into a pool and the concentric waves spread out further and further. Who knows where it will end? Redeemed humanity is still young. It has hardly come to its full strength, but already there is joy enough in the little finger of a great saint such as that woman, that all dead things of the universe are awakened into life. Because that's the love of God. That's what love really is. Love is something that if we give it, if we pour it out to people, and I'm talking about God's love here, it redeems people from death to life. That's the true love, the love of the Father, that we are invited when we are given part of the family of God to invite others. And this woman that could be sitting in the pews right now and no one would think twice, like no one would know. She could be here right now, sitting in these seats. And we would never know how important she was and how special she was. You know why? Because she would be talking about how important we are and how special we are. She would be serving us like her sons and her daughters. That's the kind of love. When I was single and I was looking for a woman, I would always used to say, I don't want to find a woman that when she walks into the room, every eye turns on her and she's the center of attention. That kind of beauty is shallow and it's cheap. I want the kind of woman that when she walks into the room, she makes the room more beautiful and special and wonderful. Why? Because she so loves the people in it that they are happier because she's there. She might not be the center of attention. Nobody might even notice that she's there. But she's just going around the room, loving people and serving people. And they are all lifted up. Luckily, God gave me both. But that is what I think we should be focused on. And this is not just for women. This is true for men too. To be the kind of person that when we walk into a room, it's a better room. Not because we're better, but because we lift other people up, that we love other people, that we focus on other people, and that we care for other people. This is what it means to be a Christian. This is what it means to be a follower of God. You want to be a saint? Because the saint has so much love from God that even the tip of their little finger brings death to life. Even just a portion of the love of God is enough to change people. That's the kind of love that God is calling us to. It's love that when we give it to other people because we are looking at making the room more beautiful, making the room more special. This is the kind of love that God calls us to. And this is what true greatness looks like. You want to be great? You want to be the best? You've got that competitive nature? Well, the CEOs in this world say, how many employees do you have under you? And that's one of their measurements for being great. Jesus says, how many people are you serving? How many people are you lifting up? How many people are you loving like sons and daughters? Jeff Putman is a pastor. He says, there's no room for mature Christians in the body of Christ. And before you get excited, he says, if you want to be mature, you got to be a parent. Now, that doesn't mean you have to literally go have children, right? But that means that you have to be loving people like sons and daughters. You have to be loving people like sons and daughters. I want to end us with an illustration. Okay? And just going to give me a second. Jesus said that if you want to be the greatest, you got to love one of these. If you want to be the greatest, here, this is your illustration. She cries, she complains. I thought she might be crying now because she's crying with mom, but she's being nice and good. She likes attention. If you want to be the greatest, love like a mother loves her children. A mother doesn't care about getting credit for being a mother. A mother is the greatest act of selfless love because if Angela's not here right now so I can talk about her, if this baby was at risk, if this baby was going to die, would Angela think, well, I want other people to think that I'm a good mother, so I'm going to put my life on the line to try to save this baby? Would she think that? Does anyone think that she would think that? Because that's stupid. Okay, no. She would think, my baby. And she would throw herself down, even if she knew that she was going to die, for just the chance that one of these might live. Her baby, her Kaylee. That's the mother's love. And that's the love that God has for us. See, the Bible says that God did not give us a spirit to be afraid, a spirit of fear, but instead He said, I gave you a spirit of adoption, a spirit to be a son or a daughter of the King. God first loved us in our brokenness that He said, you are my baby and I want you. I don't care what you've done. I don't care how many mistakes you made. I love you and I want you to be mine. I want to adopt you. Your earthly father and mother might have been great, might have been wonderful, because it's not about stealing children. Because my love will be so great that you'll have more love for your father and mother. Or maybe they were not. Maybe they weren't there for you and they abandoned you and you felt like you weren't worth anything because they weren't there for you in your life. But the Father was always there for you, saying, I want you, you're mine. I adopted you. He was looking at you, even if you were crying, unlike Andy, and saying, I want you to be my child. I want you to be in my family. But here's the best part about the body of Christ, and I say this all the time, but it never gets old to me. What I say is the greatest gift is not just that the Father so loved us that He said, I adopt you, you are part of my family, I want you to be my son, my daughter. But He said, and now I give you the invitation to give it to others, to give that same love. God so loved us, now let us go and love the world. Let us go and give people the kind of love that Angela has for Kaylee, that every mother has for their daughter and their son when they're just a little baby. Because there are broken people that can't do this on their own, that need someone to nurse them, someone to hold them, someone to lift them up and encourage them when they're feared or when they're afraid. And God has given you that message, that hope, that you can be that voice of truth that speaks to people and says, you're mine, and I love you.